Today marks the start of the early signing period for Division I football commits.
And who signed on early signing day?
Football fans, it's National Signing Day.
Yeah, that's when those high school players can sign their letter of intent, committing to the team that they're going to be playing for.
Hello and welcome back into the D1 Rejects Recruiting Report, powered by Aaron. Tonight, we're talking about signing day, and when it comes to signing day, a lot of people think that second week of February, right? When you see a lot of people posting all over, the high schools, they do it up. But we're in December, and joining me tonight to talk about it, Dan Fedrosi, what is the difference? I mean, people call it the early signing day. What does that mean for the people playing at this level, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Kobe. Another great week of football, another awesome topic to talk about tonight. You know, for years and years and years, that February signing day was for everybody. Division I all the way down to everyone that signed scholarships and then at the time letters of intent. You know, and a couple of years ago, kind of based a little bit, even before the pandemic happened, we all started recognizing that the higher levels, right? The highest levels are getting their kids verbally committed. They're ready to roll, and then they're just holding on for all these months. So everyone got together and kind of said, you know what, maybe there's value in having a December signing period. Let these seniors who have made their verbal decisions, their families have thought it through, they're ready to roll. We don't need to belabor the point anymore. We don't need to let them hold out for another 2 months. Let's just get these kids signed, get them moving forward. And it also, I think, had a really big value in the fact that a lot of kids at the highest of levels will early enroll in the January semester. So I think kind of just the powers that be, the coaches, everyone got together and said this makes sense. And really what's happened is it's become the signing day. Mm-hmm. And you'll hear the word early signing day. And while it's the first one, it's really the signing day, because you have to remember, any coach that has an opportunity to get their players locked in and know their roster moving forward, especially in this day and age, they're going to want to take advantage of that first day. So it's the signing day for Division I schools only. And that provides some really cool things for small school prospects as they go through this process, because this December signing day can help them get some clarity moving forward.
And right now it's that December kind of 4th through 6th in that range, and that used to be even later. Now that was changed semi-recently, I believe back in maybe 2017 or maybe a little bit later than that. So there wasn't that overlap with the transfer portal, because that's what we've seen now just the last couple of days here. The transfer portal has opened up, and you're talking thousands upon thousands of names into the transfer portal. So now at least there's not that overlap. It's kind of 1A and 1B. You get that signing period out of the way, and then coaches can really dive into that transfer portal. I'm assuming from a coach's perspective, that's got to be much nicer.
Well, I don't know about that. I'll be real frank. It creates so many dynamics because, you've got signing day, but then a week later, you've got players and your roster drastically changes. You know, a year ago, the portal actually opened before signing day. So they knew the transfers that were transferring in, because the transfers that were transferring out had already made their decisions. So the classes were actually bigger because they included transfers, where this year it was primarily only high school kids. So it's created this really unique conundrum for coaches, but I think also for the players too. You've got signing day, then followed by the portal window opening, and then followed by the college football playoffs. Haven't even kicked off yet in bowl games. Let that sink in. Yep. And all the while, you've got small school prospects, kids that have maybe been right on that borderline with Division I schools, but they're really getting the most attention from Division II. Maybe even like an FCS, but Division II, Division III, NAIA, they're really looking for clarity. So we've actually, in my opinion, muddied up the water so much that there can be some clarity, but we just continue to tinker with this. And I say we, I mean the powers that be, the conference commissioners, the people that have some form of an impact on setting these calendars. I wish they could come to a much better conclusion. You heard Coach Kiffin from Ole Miss say, this doesn't really make sense when you think about it like an NFL model. You don't have free agency open up before the AFC, NFC championships. And I think that's a great point. Yeah. So they have to continue to work through this so it can be just a much better, smooth process. And I think that trickle it down for the Division IIs and Division IIIs, I know this isn't going to be their main point of focus, but it really can have a great impact to allow people to know clarity's happened. Roster management at the highest of levels has happened. Because you got to think now, Division II players, Division III players, NAIA players, they can all still try to transfer. NAIA is a little bit different, moving into a different governing body. But you can try to transfer, but you have to wait for the highest of levels to open their windows, to have their roster set, so you know where your opportunities are and you know where to start working. So it creates a really big just kind of dynamic that everyone has to try to navigate. I hope they find a little bit more clarity. So this year, I don't know if it's any better, but it's still kind of that same jumbled mess right around December.
And speaking on that note of clarity, for the guys that are probably going to end up at some of those quote-unquote small schools, they see all these guys get picked up and those signing classes and those rosters start to get filled out at the Division I level, especially when you talk about the decreased roster sizes and some of those limitations being put on at those big schools. I would imagine that does give them, whether they like it or not, some clarity for these guys moving forward that will end up eventually signing on that prototypical kind of February signing day. What does that process look like for them now moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the ability for it to create some clarity for kids that, okay, I was maybe having a few conversations here and there with a borderline Division I school. It can now let you realize they've signed 20, 22 players. I just was working up the numbers for my Aaron families, and you're looking at it, and in the last 4 years, you've realized almost 99.9% of the players that are signed to Division I schools come in that December period. So the opportunities, even for some February late offers, really aren't there anymore. They're going to fill those spots with transfer portal players because the kids that are transferring out are going to generally be older or at least have a year, maybe even sometimes only one semester of experience. But I need to fill that with a kid who's had at least 1 or 2 years of experience. So the opportunities have just been filled up.
Yep.
Yeah, the chance for you to get into that Division I school has kind of ended at this point, and it's now a point for you to say, as we've talked about many times on this show, is this what I want? Playing at Division II, Division III, and NAIA level, is this what I want? And if it is, it's time to go full bore because there is no more looking back.
Yeah.
There's not any more, if any, what ifs. It's time to say, these are the opportunities in front of me, and let's either go attack it or let's not. So I think that forced clarity is good for the small levels. There's still so many dynamics with Division I players and where you're sitting in the portal for the next couple months. But as a high school recruit, once you realize those Division I schools are filled up, it's time to start focusing on the really cool opportunities. And you could be one of these playoff players making a huge impact, like this running back we were just talking about before at Susquehanna. That could be you. You could be making a huge impact at a Division II, a Division III school. You could change the direction of their entire program. So it's time to have that clarity, move forward, and go rock and roll with what these opportunities can present to you.
100%. And one more note on kind of that before we get talking about some of these players this time around. For those guys going through, finishing up their junior year this coming semester in that 2026 class, what does the path look like for them now? How does that change moving forward? And I'd imagine right now, I mean, you're kind of in the middle of what should be kind of crunch time for them heading into this offseason.
Yeah, it's go time now. I would talk to my families or anybody that would reach out, in August, and you're starting your junior year, and maybe you've gained a little bit of attention. Maybe somebody's called your high school coach and said, man, this young sophomore's pretty good. And you're kind of on that front porch, like you're stepping on the step, you're getting ready to knock on the door. Like now, as a 2026, you've made your impact on film. The schools have filled up their high school rosters, and they're, again, still focusing on the transfer portal and roster management for the next couple of weeks. But you're in the trenches now. It's go time. Mm-hmm. It's time for those schools to start saying, is this high school kid good enough for us to come see in January? Potentially bring them over for like a spring practice, a junior day visit, because those decisions are getting made now in the spring period about, are you legitimately good enough to play at this level? And then that trickle down happens. So as a 2026, I tell people all the time, these next couple months are super boring. Like, young kids don't want to be talking to old guys like me, but that's what's going to happen for the next couple months. And then you have to use that to build relationships, to try to see what these coaches are about. And maybe even if they're interested, and if they're not, start focusing on every opportunity that comes your way to see, is this a fit for me? So I think this is such an important time. It's not the most enjoyable time. Yep. I know kids are on social media, but they don't want to be on there talking to coaches. They want to be talking to friends, doing different things like that. But it's such an important time for that boringness to help set you up, because you are in the trenches now as a 2026. And really, a lot of it's going to be kind of set as far as what your path is going to be moving forward for the next, career, really in the next few months. So I think it's so important to understand that you're in it. It's go time now as a 2026.
Yeah, kind of a daunting prospect, but at the end of the day, there is a deadline for everything, yep. And if you don't see it, the coaches will. They'll find it. Yes. So everyone's kind of on the clock in that regard. And Springfield College is a team that we've talked about quite a bit on this show. We had Arson, their stud fullback, leading the charge there for that offense. And if you know anything about Springfield College, the pride, they run that triple option. We've seen almost a resurgence of that at all levels, yep. of small school football. And the one piece that you need to have, an absolute necessity to run that, is a dominant offensive yep. line. They got a couple guys on there that have really been standing out, but there's one I know you wanted to highlight. Well,
I mean, you're right. It's really cool to see the resurgence of triple option, flex bone. And I was actually talking to somebody recently. I said, in a lot of ways, even schools like Ferris are very triple option based. It's just run and then pass and then quarterback run, right? And so we think triple option, we think Harding, we think, Army, Navy, Air Force. And then you think about what Springfield's doing. And I had done some research into how good they were, and it was actually watching your show that I realized they were a triple option. This is amazing. And it goes to show that if you invest in what the coaches do, you will have success. I have not known Springfield to be the high level year in and year out national contender, and to go out and beat the defending Sonny Cortland, the defending national champs, right? To go out and beat them running that kind of an offense shows a massive commitment by their players, obviously their coaches, but by their players into their offense. So when I saw those numbers, I had to do a double take. And you can catch me right here if I'm wrong, but it was almost like the stats were literally flipped.
Yeah.
They ran for over 300 yards, but only threw for I want to say 45, 50, which makes sense as a triple option team. And then you look at Sonny Cortland, they threw for all these yards and could barely run it.
Yep.
And that is the essence of a triple option team, right? And to have that kind of success, you've got to have a great offensive line. You've got to be able to move people off the ball and create space for your triple option reads. And when I was watching and kind of looking at some players, I looked at Grady Roadman from a school in Massachusetts, and what you saw out of high school film was a fighter. Not literally, if I'm talking in the essence of the game of football, scrapping, driving guys off the ball. Does not have, again, your prototypical size of that massive length that in the Northeast might get noticed by a Boston College or maybe even one of those ACC schools. Okay, there's even some really good Division II schools there. So maybe from a standpoint, he still didn't even have quite that length that they were looking for. But ability to get off the ball and keep his feet moving through contact is everything for a triple option veer offense, right? I don't need to worry so much about position blocking because my fullback is right behind me and it's go time. So when I saw Grady's film, I'm like, yep, this is exactly how you go into a program like Springfield. You develop, you get yourself, in a lot of cases, 3 or 4 year players that have developed and been in the system, but they got to have that fight. They got to have that willingness to compete, play in and play out, because there's going to be a couple 2-yard runs, right? As a standard trip, sometimes the defensive end is going to make the quarterback in a tough spot and they're going to make the tackle. You have to just stay at it. He comes off the ball. I thought it was a great example of probably why they're having success, and to be able to beat the defending national champion, not easy. And you need some fighters and some scrappers. And obviously he was a great example of that.
Yeah, and I think the one stat that really shows that as far as the offensive line unit, I kind of mentioned it before we got going, Springfield, they have 8 rushers over 100 yards on the year. They broke the Division III record for single-season rushing yards with 5,327 yards on the year. And we had Arson, like I said, Stefan on the show earlier. I mean, he's got over 1,600 as a fullback, which is at that position is ridiculous. But then you go down the list. If you've got 8 guys that have had that level or to some extent of that success throughout the course of the season, well, the common denominator is the 5 or 6 guys up front that are moving the bodies, and obviously the quarterback and some other offensive skill guys that all have to buy in as well and make blocks down the field and do their part in this kind of offense. But I think that's the biggest thing that separates it is not necessarily, but for lack of a better term, it doesn't matter who you put back there.
Right.
These guys are going to have success. They're going to find the holes, and they're going to make stuff happen.
And that's why the offensive line is so critical. Now, the key is, are they going to have the confidence moving forward and playing a North Central team that is traditionally there? I think they're going to be well prepared, but will this confidence continue to buoy that program and take on a North Central program that will, again, provide different challenges? But you might catch yourself with a hot triple option team, a lot like what Harding did a year ago, kind of ran into a buzzsaw this year. But that is a very daunting task for North Central if Springfield can keep that confidence, juice, energy, and that offensive line is going to be huge too. I can't wait to see.
It will be. Defensive secondary for the Cardinals stepped up big last week, 2 interceptions off Ben Wellman, that Hope quarterback. But can the run defense in the front 7, can they have that level of success? Because Springfield ain't going to air it out on you. But a team that found themselves in a little bit more of a nail-biter this last week, Minnesota State, Mankato, playing Bemidji again. The regular season finish was ridiculous with the last-second field goal. This time around, it took an 80-yard fumble recovery to really flip the script late in the fourth quarter. I got to watch that one in person. It was outrageous. But talk to me about the Mavs and one of the guys on that squad.
Well, I mean, Mankato's always been one of the traditional programs as long as I can remember, at least in my coaching career, not only in the NSIC, but in the national scene. I remember a good friend of mine, Jake Dickert, coaching in that national championship when they were playing in Kansas City, actually. snowing. They had a really good team. And I think their team really, in a lot of ways, embodies Coach Offner and really everything that he's about and what that team is was kind of showed against Bemidji. Bemidji was a hot team, had them on the ropes. And even if you're a traditional power, you need strong leadership, both from your coaching staff and your seniors, to be able to come back from that. And obviously they were able to do that. But one thing that I was really impressed by, again, not only just the fact that they were able to win, come back from kind of 17-7 down, but when you look a little bit about what Grant Guyett did, one of their receivers from Omaha, Westside High School, that is a very traditional fit in all these really good programs out in that region of the country. And when you think about football, and you think of take out, major Power 4 football, right? Where is some of the best football played? You're talking about the Dakotas. You're talking about Nebraska. You're talking about Iowa. Think about North Dakota State, South Dakota State, and South Dakota, and UND, what they're doing at the FCS level. And then you think about how strong the MIAA has been with Pitt State and Northwest Missouri at times. And then you think about what Mankato's did. They're always in it, year in and year out. And here's a kid from Omaha, or from Nebraska, Westside High School out in Omaha, and he's just very smooth and natural catching the ball, especially over the middle. Right now, again, I don't know if he's a 4-3 guy. That's pretty clear. When you watch his high school film, you can see okay, maybe he's not a Cornhusker or good enough, at that time to play for the Hawkeyes at Iowa. But you can see where a Mankato takes a kid like this, probably has the ability to play both inside and outside off of his high school film, dynamic but super smooth. I thought extremely explosive ball skills when he's going up to get the ball out of the air. You can see that in some of his high school film. Again, that's what you're going to need in playoff football. If you can run the ball, great. If you can be a team that can have 300 yards just grinding it out on the ground, but you're probably at some point going to be in a dogfight where you're going to have to throw it. And you're going to need somebody over the middle. Grant, I thought, was a really good example of that. Again, not just in his high school film, but also what you're kind of seeing him do now. These are the kind of players that make these huge impacts in the semifinals when they get a chance to play down in Texas, if they're fortunate enough to play down there. His skill set fits what teams like this have traditionally done, especially to be able to throw the ball, because it can't always just be aired out downfield, verticals all day long. Got to have that toughness over the middle. You got to be smooth. You got to make those critical catches when they count. And sometimes that quarterback can't make a pinpoint pass in the fourth quarter when he's already taken 20 shots. He's just fighting and scratching and clawing. And you need that one dig route. It might be up a little bit. He shows the ability to go up and get the ball, take the hits afterwards. Extremely impressive player. But again, I think another great representation, not only of the program, but what Coach Offner has done there. And I think it's just a testament to why they're year after year.
And we've seen a little bit of an identity change from this Mavericks squad from just a year ago. You lose Sheen Butler-Lawson, who makes the jump up to FCS Indiana State, I believe, and they've played a lot of bully ball, the Mavericks have, over the years. And this year, and while they have not lost the physicality and the part of that culture and the play style, they've lost a little bit of that offensive identity of what they had the past few seasons. So Hayden Eckert and company under center there, they've had to find new ways to put up that same level of production. They're in the national semifinal. I would think it's safe to say they've found a way to get it done. But
testament to a great team right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the NAIA level, and Keiser, number one team in the country, the defending national champions, on a hell of a run right now. They continue to put up just ridiculous offensive performances. Just broke their program's single game total offensive yardage record just a week ago in the playoffs against a quality opponent. Talk about the man under center for the Seahawks.
Well, first off, I was sitting here and I was following, again, your program has got me so much more into all these different levels. And that's coming from a small school guy, somebody who's very familiar with it. But I will tell you what, this Keiser program, obviously having a great run of success, but that nice warm weather down in Florida, I think that might be a perfect setup for me to go down there and watch a game in person. So if I had to choose, that might, I might just have to take the tough task of going down there. But then I started diving into them a little bit, and they're on a heck of a run. Did I see 22 games in a row? And here's what's really unique about it. When I looked at Shea Spencer, their quarterback, I saw that he had 4 touchdowns. He threw the ball 23 times, which isn't exactly not many. I mean, it's not 50. You're not talking about they threw it every single down. But 23 attempts with no interceptions in a playoff game against high-quality competition with four touchdowns. I mean, that is extremely efficient. So then I go back and I watch his high school film because I'm always looking like, what could you see? Could you notice this stuff? Absolutely. You could see the accuracy. You couldn't see that violent arm explosion, right? We've talked a little bit about that, like with Ben Wellman a year ago.
Sure.
You didn't see that ball just flying out of his hand, but what you saw was extreme mobility within the pocket. He was not just running all the time. He was moving, very similar to other guys we've talked about. He was moving to get open to still make a throw. And then that throw would be extremely accurate. Sounds a lot like what he's doing right now at Keiser. Not that massive prototypical size. So again, he has that vision, that ability for him to kind of move and feel that pocket a little bit, but still keep the throw alive. And here's what's really unique about that. You see that coming out of Vero Beach in Florida. He set his high school passing records. He has his high school passing yards record. There you go. This is a kid that wants to throw the ball. And when you're in this place in playoffs, you're going to continue to host games and you might have a chance to continue to play in your climate. Wow, good luck stopping that, right? If you get a chance to keep bringing people down to Keiser and then you've got this nice weather, you can continue to throw the ball and be aggressive in your pass game. Super difficult to defend. It's nice when you can just boil it down to one thing. Okay, we know it's going to be tough to throw out here because of the conditions. Let's just stop the run. Let's pack the box. Let's see what happens. With a kid like this who can throw the ball, has mobility to run, but then keeps himself alive. You saw it on high school film. Extremely tough on defensive coordinators. So good luck to the teams playing them. I'm not all that surprised to see that long, win streak, but you could see it in high school film. People probably moved on from them because of the height, maybe didn't have those prototypical arm angle and release, but competitor mobility in the pocket, very accurate, tough to defeat at this time of year.
That offensive backfield is obviously one of the best in the country, much in part due to his work and what he's done there with the Seahawks, but also you talk about the two or even three-headed monster that is the running back room for Keiser. Guys like Burnett, Meisinger, and some of these other big-time names that have just been churning through some really quality backs that have made great appearances for that Keiser squad. And their season isn't over, but they certainly haven't come upon a roadblock quite yet. So I'm very curious to see what that looks like and how they respond to that adversity, if it does come for this squad, I think is also worth noting. But we talked about Springfield earlier. They got a hell of a matchup this week. North Central, a team that has been there, done that in the playoffs, especially the last couple of years. Lost a dramatic one in the Stag Bowl just a year ago. Talk about the Cards.
Well, I had to look into North Central a little bit because I'm super familiar with them. But because of this resurgence over the last couple of years, it's been like, oh, man. And I worked for a guy by the name of Chuck Martin who, in his playing days, played against them in basketball and football and was always talked so highly of them. So when I've seen this resurgence, I'm like, man, I know this program, but I'm not as intimately invested in them because I'm just not following them as closely over the last couple of years. So I started looking into them and, oh, my goodness, have they obviously had some success. 12 straight playoff wins, incredible. Again, you're talking about some of these programs out there right now that are having incredible success. There's also some that are kind of on the upswing. Pretty cool deal. But here's the thing. I was sitting here and I was like, all right, they're having all this success. They're, obviously they're really good on offense. They're really good on defense. Let's kind of take a deeper dive into it. And as I was looking into how successful their defense has been, I ran across a player, Rahmareon Roby, and he's from Lena Winslow High School, right? So what was really unique about him was when you watched his film in high school, he was almost a full house running back.
Yep.
And what was awesome about it, and this goes to, I give North Central credit. This is not easy to do in the recruiting process, especially now, because you can just go find what you want. They could see him running the ball, and his transition to defense was supernatural based off that film. Here's what I'm talking about. Quick movement skills, ability to make people miss. He's in the hole and he's moving laterally, and it's like, wow, that looks like a corner who's backpedaling and driving on a hitch route. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he's doing at North Central. He had an interception this past game when I looked at it, but at the end of the day, that translation from an undersized running back has really almost been put on the back burner the last couple of years in recruiting. I've noticed that. I'm not taking anything away from the college coaches. You have to do what's best for you. But this is a great example for anybody that were to listen to this that has any connection to recruiting or college coaches and say, you can look at a player that maybe even plays on the other side of the ball and you can see skill sets. I could even see this kid as he grows and gets bigger and stronger, because I think that was his one, weakness in high school. He was not a big kid carrying the ball, and everyone's probably like, man, can he take the pounding? I get it. But if he grows and gets bigger, this kid could play safety and be unbelievably dynamic, like some of those players we talked in our first shows. So the ability to translate an offense that no one would compare to a standard college offense like you see on, ESPN and ABC every weekend, and think this kid can be a dominant corner for us, or maybe even in time of safety, I give North Central a lot of credit because that takes vision, that takes projection, that also takes a commitment to his development and the kid as well too. Obviously, you got to give Rahmareon a ton of credit. He's obviously developed, but you could see those skill sets translating off of his high school film, even though it was going to be on the other side of the ball. Impressive player. If North Central's got a bunch of these dudes, I can totally understand why they're so good. I'm probably going to take a deeper dive to see if maybe that's a really good staple for them, and good on them if it is.
They certainly have, and yeah, spoiler, they definitely do on both sides of the ball. They got some dudes that are disruptive as hell, and maybe didn't shine, so to speak, in high school. We talked about a lot of those guys. But to close it off in the D2 level, about this Blazers squad down in Georgia, Valdosta State, title town. We talked about the physicality of a team like Mankato earlier on. That's who they draw in the semifinals. Talk about that matchup, and one of the wide receivers who just put up a ridiculous stat line in their quarterfinal game.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Valdosta, what Coach Jackson's doing down there and that program. You know, I will say this. You might tell me I'm crazy. I don't know if there's a program that has higher expectations than Valdosta.
Agreed.
You know, this is. I mean, we throw out the Grand Valleys, what Ferris is doing right now, but I'm here to tell you, living in that region for 1 year of my life, I realized, whoa, they really care about Valdosta winning national titles here. Okay, you've got one of the traditional high school powers in the country in Valdosta High School. And obviously you've got Valdosta State right down there, the Blazers. They expect that team to be in the hunt year in and year out, no different than the top programs in the country. And I got to give Coach Jackson a lot of credit. Now they have brought in a ton of transfers, and I give them credit for realizing what's best for them too. Not the entire program's not all transfers, and they do recruit high school very strongly. But one player that kind of stuck out was Rodney Bullard from Albany, went to Westover High School. And when I watched him, I'm like, yep, I can totally see why a kid here might be overlooked by SEC schools. Does not have that burn away speed, right? But then to watch Rodney Bullard go out and have 3 touchdowns in this last game, I'm like, yep, there you go. These are the kind of players that Valdosta grabs, fills in with a really strong group of transfers, and this is why they're in the position year in and year out to be contending for national titles. Kid who has the ability to go up and get the football, kid who has the ability maybe not to run away from everybody, but get in the middle of the field and split safeties after he makes the catch. That is not easy to do, and that's what I saw on his high school film. Again, I don't know if in and out of his breaks he's the fastest kid. The size might obviously been limited. There's no doubt about that. But what he's been able to translate over to Valdosta, I got to give Coach Jackson a lot of credit for him seeing that. And then he had a really big game this past week. And here's the unique thing too. We talked a little bit about this with Keiser. But when I started thinking about Valdosta, and if you had to put a gun to my head, I'd say I think they might be the favorites, in my opinion. And here's why. You're going to get Mankato to come down to Valdosta, Georgia. Again, you have your entire offense open. Rodney and the rest of the receiver group can really be effective. Good weather down there. You can throw the ball. You obviously have physicality to run it. No concerns there. And you're going to have a really strong defense. Then where's the national championship game? You're not talking about traipsing up to Kansas City like I talked about a few years ago when I remember watching a couple of those games. You're talking about going to McKinley, Texas, right? Mm-hmm. Similar climate. Your offense is still open. Rodney, and again, that entire receiver corps can have a huge impact on what Valdosta is able to do. Again, I'm taking nothing away from the other 3. Give Slippery Rock a lot of credit. Really strong program. Mankato's going to give him a tough game. Ferris is obviously a machine. But if you had to tell me, Dan, where do you think you'd put it right now today, a futures bet, it'd probably be on the Blazers.
I like that, and it helps when you've got a Harlan Hill finalist throwing you the rock from under center and Sammy Edwards down there. And that game against Virginia Union, 13-19, he had 4 tuds. 3 of those were to Bullard on the outside. He finishes his final stat line in that quarterfinal matchup. 5 catches, 158 yards, and 3 tuds. That's the closest thing to like a Randy Moss stat line that I've seen in quite some time in terms of raw efficiency.
Yep, incredible. Unbelievable what they're doing. I mean, it just goes to show to the talent level in Division II. And again, especially with these 4 teams coming. Again, I said I had my pick, but nothing would shock me at this point with the caliber of teams that you got playing in these semifinals.
I'm right there with you. Well, thank you very much again, my man. I appreciate the insight. It's been some good stuff.
Awesome. Enjoyed it, Kobe. Thanks.
Absolutely. See ya.